Ever been in a conversation where the other person suddenly shuts down, stops responding, or looks like they've mentally checked out? It's awkward, it's frustrating, and it can make you second guess everything you just said. But here's the thing: how you respond in that moment can either rebuild the bridge or burn it completely. Recognizing signs of disengagement early means paying attention not only to the words someone uses, but also to their tone, body language, and energy. Sometimes disengagement doesn't announce itself loudly. It just slips in quietly through subtle cues that most people miss. Maybe their eye contact starts to fade, or their shoulders slump, or their responses shrink from full sentences to short phrases. You might hear a change in the rhythm of their voice, a softer tone, or even a complete pause before answering. All of these are signals that something has shifted internally for them. And the earlier you can notice these changes, the more options you have for handling the situation in a calm and constructive way. Being tuned into these small shifts isn't about becoming hyper alert or paranoid. It's about staying connected enough to notice when the other person's focus or comfort begins to waver. Because in that moment, you can decide to slow down, check in, and steer the conversation back toward connection before it drifts too far away. It's also important to remember that disengagement can take different forms depending on the person and the context. Some people withdraw physically, leaning back, crossing their arms, or turning their body slightly away. Others stay still but mentally drift off, nodding along without really processing what's being said. And then there are those who disengage in more obvious ways, like checking their phone, glancing at the clock, or interrupting to change the subject. Each version tells you something different about their state of mind, but they all point toward the same reality. The connection is loosening. Noticing these moments early allows you to respond with intention instead of reacting out of frustration. This awareness is like a skill you can sharpen with practice, where the more you observe people's patterns, the faster you become at recognizing when presence begins to fade. When you catch disengagement early, you give yourself a chance to address it while there's still emotional space to work with. The longer it goes unnoticed, the more disconnected the other person becomes, and the harder it is to bring them back into the conversation without tension. Think of it like catching a small leak before it floods the room. Early attention saves you from a much bigger mess later. This isn't about stopping the conversation mid-sentence every time someone glances away, but about being mindful enough to adjust your delivery, pacing, or approach so they can re-engage naturally. Sometimes all it takes is a pause, a well-placed question, or a shift in tone to remind them that their presence matters and that the conversation is a shared experience, not a lecture. One reason this skill is so valuable is that disengagement often happens for reasons unrelated to you or the topic at hand. They could be tired, stressed, distracted by something in their personal life, or even feeling unwell. If you take disengagement personally every time you see it, you risk responding defensively, which can make them pull away even more. By noticing it early and holding back judgment, you create a safer atmosphere for them to rejoin when they're ready. You're not just listening to what they're saying, you're reading the pauses, the hesitations, and the little moments in between words that tell you how connected they feel. This ability to spot disengagement early also means you can prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. So many conflicts happen not because of what was said, but because someone stopped feeling heard or understood and mentally checked out. If you can catch that shift before the frustration builds, you can ask a clarifying question, acknowledge the change in energy, or offer them space if that's what they need. Doing this shows them you're aware, that you care about their perspective, and that you're not just talking at them, but talking with them. This builds trust over time because people remember when you noticed and respected their boundaries without being told. A big part of recognizing disengagement early is training yourself to see it as information, not rejection. It's not about winning their attention back at all costs, but about understanding what the change in their presence might mean in the bigger picture. Sometimes it's a cue to slow down, other times it's a cue to wrap up, and sometimes it's an invitation to ask what's going on beneath the surface. This mindset turns disengagement into an opportunity for connection instead of a roadblock. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes to stay grounded in moments where someone else is drifting away from the conversation. What's powerful is that once you've learned to notice disengagement early, you also learn to handle your own presence in conversations better. You become more conscious of when you're fully engaged and when your own attention starts to slip, which makes you a more intentional communicator overall. This kind of awareness not only improves your relationships, but it also helps you navigate tough conversations without losing your cool because you're reading the whole interaction in real time instead of just the words being exchanged. Pausing and giving space without rushing is one of the most underrated skills in handling moments when someone disengages because our instinct is often to fill the silence or push for an immediate reaction. When you notice that shift in their presence, the best thing you can do is resist the urge to speed up or talk more to keep their attention. Instead, slowing down and creating a pause allows the other person to process whatever is going on internally without feeling cornered. A pause isn't a void to be feared. It's a moment of breathing room where the pressure drops and the other person has a chance to reorient themselves in the conversation. The ability to hold that space calmly communicates patience and respect, letting them know they are not being forced into engagement before they are ready. This doesn't mean you stop caring about the conversation. It means you trust that stepping back for a moment can actually pull someone closer rather than push them away. There's a reason rushing rarely works when someone has pulled back. Speed creates pressure, and pressure is the opposite of what a disengaged person needs. If you imagine yourself in their position, the moment you feel like someone is trying to hurry you back into talking, your natural reaction is to retreat further or shut down completely. By slowing the pace, you replace urgency with safety. Sometimes that means literally taking a breath and letting a few seconds pass before you speak. Other times it means shifting your tone to something softer or even just sitting in silence for a beat longer than feels comfortable. These pauses give both you and the other person a chance to reset emotionally, and they prevent the conversation from turning into a chase where one person is trying to catch the other's attention and the other is running from it. Giving space also means being okay with letting them guide the timing of their re-entry into the conversation. It's not about waiting with a mental stopwatch or holding back only to demand answers when the silence ends. It's about allowing them to come forward when they feel ready. You can show you're still present without pushing by maintaining open body language, relaxed eye contact, or a gentle nod that says you're listening whenever they decide to speak again. This creates a low-pressure environment that often makes it easier for them to re-engage because they don't feel like they're stepping into a defensive interrogation. Your calm presence becomes an invitation rather than a demand, and that small shift in energy can change the entire trajectory of the conversation. One of the most valuable parts of pausing and giving space is that it works even when you're not entirely sure why the other person has disengaged. You might not know if it's because of something you said, something unrelated, or just a moment of mental fatigue, but the pause gives room for clarity to emerge naturally. Sometimes they'll use the space to gather their thoughts and explain. Other times, they'll simply return to the conversation without needing to address it directly. Either way, you've avoided escalating the disconnect by trying to force momentum before they were ready. This is where self-control plays a big role, because the urge to fill silence can be strong, especially in emotionally charged moments, but the discipline to wait is what keeps the connection from breaking entirely. Pausing isn't just about silence. It's also about slowing the emotional pace of the conversation. When people feel emotionally rushed, they often respond with defensiveness or withdrawal. But when they feel like they have time to be understood, they're more likely to open up. You can create that sense of time by not only speaking more slowly, but also by allowing more room between your questions and their answers. Even your breathing can signal that you're not in a hurry, that you're willing to move at a pace that works for both of you. In tense moments, this can be the difference between them shutting down completely and them deciding to stay present. Giving space doesn't mean you're disengaging yourself. It means you're managing your own presence so they can have the freedom to manage theirs. You can still stay attentive and available without crowding the moment with words or demands. Think of it like holding out a chair for someone. You're making room for them, but you're not pulling them into it. They get to choose when they sit down, and the fact that you left it open for them speaks volumes about your respect for their autonomy. People tend to remember when you made it easy for them to come back into a conversation on their own terms because it made them feel valued rather than controlled. This approach also builds long-term trust because you're showing them that you can handle pauses without panicking or reacting in ways that make them feel pressured. Over time, this creates a pattern where they know that even if they momentarily check out, you won't take it personally or respond with impatience. That knowledge makes it easier for them to stay honest with you because they don't have to hide their disengagement or pretend they're fine when they're not. By pausing and giving space without rushing, you're not just handling a moment, you're strengthening the overall relationship in a way that makes future conversations smoother and more authentic. Inviting re-engagement with curiosity and not pressure is about creating an opening for someone to step back into the conversation without feeling like they are being forced or judged. When a person disengages, it's often because they feel misunderstood, overwhelmed, or distracted, and the last thing that helps is adding more tension. Instead of making them feel cornered with pointed questions or frustrated tones, you can approach them with a genuine interest in understanding what's going on for them. Curiosity communicates care without urgency, and it shifts the focus from, "Why aren't you paying attention?" to, "I'm interested in what's happening for you right now." This softens the dynamic because you're not accusing them of doing something wrong. You're expressing a willingness to listen. Even small phrases like, "Is something on your mind?" or "Want to take a moment?" can signal that you see their disengagement and you're making room for them to return without feeling pressured to defend themselves. The key to this is making sure your curiosity feels authentic, not strategic. People can tell when you're asking questions just to get the conversation moving again versus when you genuinely care about their perspective. That means slowing your tone, softening your body language, and making sure your questions are open-ended rather than loaded. Instead of asking in a way that demands an immediate explanation, you give them options and control over how much they want to share. Sometimes they'll open up right away, and sometimes they'll simply acknowledge the question and return to the topic on their own. Either way, the point is that you've opened the door instead of trying to pull them through it. This approach turns the moment into an invitation, and invitations feel a lot safer than obligations. Another benefit of curiosity over pressure is that it reduces defensiveness. When someone feels pushed, they instinctively guard themselves, but when they feel invited, they are more likely to engage willingly. That's because curiosity sends the message that you're seeking to understand rather than to correct or control. It's like saying, "I see you, I'm here, and I want to hear you," without explicitly using those words. That reassurance can be enough to bring down whatever wall they've started to build. And if they choose not to respond immediately, your curious approach still plants a seed that you're open to hearing them when they're ready. Inviting someone back into a conversation with curiosity also means being okay with not having all the answers right away. You might ask what's on their mind and get a vague or minimal response, and that's fine. The important thing is that you've acknowledged their disengagement without making it a conflict. By avoiding the pressure to fix things instantly, you allow trust to rebuild naturally. Sometimes the act of noticing and gently inquiring is enough for them to feel seen and respected, even if they don't fully re-engage until later. This patience is a big part of why curiosity works. It's less about getting an immediate result and more about keeping the door open for ongoing connection. It's also worth noting that curiosity can work on multiple levels. You can be curious about their thoughts, their emotions, or even about external factors that might be affecting them. For example, maybe they're distracted because something urgent happened earlier in the day, or maybe they've been feeling tired and overwhelmed for reasons unrelated to your conversation. By showing you're interested in their world beyond the current topic, you signal that you value them as a person, not just as a participant in the moment. That wider sense of care can make it easier for them to return because they know you're not just trying to get back to your own agenda. Sometimes the curiosity you offer doesn't even have to be verbal. It can be expressed through attentive listening, open facial expressions, or even a slight pause that gives them room to speak. Nonverbal cues like leaning in slightly, nodding gently, or keeping your posture open can communicate that you're ready to hear from them without pressuring them to talk. When combined with patient silence, these cues create an environment where re-engagement feels like a choice they want to make rather than something they have to do to avoid tension. This sense of autonomy is powerful because people are more willing to engage when they feel their voice will be welcomed instead of judged. Over time, practicing curiosity instead of pressure builds a reputation for you as someone who can handle difficult or disengaged moments with grace. People start to feel safer having conversations with you because they know they won't be pushed or rushed when they're not ready. That safety makes it more likely that even if they do disengage, they'll return on their own because they trust the space you've created. And in moments where they might otherwise shut down completely, they instead see an opening, a soft landing that you've provided simply by choosing to lead with curiosity rather than control. Keeping your tone calm and open when someone disengages is one of the most important ways to maintain the possibility of reconnection because tone sets the emotional temperature of the entire interaction. When a person starts to pull away, your voice can either invite them back or push them further out, depending on how you use it. A calm tone tells them there's no danger, no pressure, and no judgment waiting for them if they decide to re-engage. It shows that you are grounded, patient, and in control of your own emotions, even if theirs are shifting. An open tone goes a step further by signaling warmth and receptivity, making it clear that you're ready to listen rather than react. This combination creates a safe space where the other person can find their way back without feeling like they have to defend themselves or match a heightened energy. When people disengage, they are often in a vulnerable or uncertain state, and any hint of sharpness or impatience in your voice can amplify that feeling. That's why managing your tone is just as important as managing your words. You could say something perfectly reasonable, but if it's wrapped in frustration or urgency, it will feel like pressure to the other person. On the other hand, even a simple acknowledgement spoken in a steady, kind tone can carry reassurance. Think about the difference between what's wrong said with tension and the same words spoken with gentleness. The content might be identical, but the delivery completely changes how it lands. This is why staying calm and open is less about what you say and more about how you say it. A calm and open tone is also a signal to yourself as much as it is to the other person. When you keep your delivery steady, you help regulate your own emotional state, which in turn helps you respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. If their disengagement triggers irritation or insecurity in you, your tone can be the anchor that stops those emotions from spilling out in ways that damage the conversation. This doesn't mean you're suppressing your feelings. It means you're choosing to communicate them in a way that supports connection rather than conflict. Your tone becomes a tool for maintaining control over the moment instead of letting the moment control you. Part of keeping your tone open is maintaining an energy that says, "You're welcome here," rather than "you'd better come back right now." That openness is what separates an invitation from a demand. Even if the conversation is serious or the topic is difficult, your tone can still carry a sense of curiosity and respect. This is especially important when the other person may already feel misunderstood or unheard, because an open tone counters the tension they might be expecting. It allows them to approach you without bracing for criticism or defensiveness. And when someone doesn't feel like they have to shield themselves from your reaction, they are more likely to re-engage willingly. An open tone doesn't require you to fake emotions you're not feeling, but it does require you to intentionally soften the edges of your delivery. You might do this by slowing your pace, lowering your volume slightly, or adding pauses that give space for the other person to respond. These subtle adjustments tell them you're not in a rush and that their voice matters in the exchange. They also give the impression that you're present in the moment rather than just pushing toward your own conversational goal. By creating that space in your tone, you're giving them a way to step back in without feeling overwhelmed. It's worth noting that people often mirror the tone they hear, which means your calmness can actually help them settle themselves. If they've pulled back because they're stressed, frustrated, or overwhelmed, your steady tone becomes a model for how the interaction can feel. Over time, this can shift the pattern of how they respond to moments of disconnection, because they start to associate conversations with you as places where they can remain composed, even when things feel uncertain. This kind of consistency makes it easier for them to trust you, which in turn makes them more likely to stay engaged in future discussions. Practicing a calm and open tone takes self-awareness, especially in moments where your instinct might be to push harder or raise your voice. It's a discipline that comes from recognizing that re-engagement is far more likely to happen in a low-pressure emotional environment. By holding that space with your tone, you're not just helping the other person find their way back to the conversation, you're also strengthening the foundation of trust that makes every future conversation easier. This is how tone becomes not just a way of speaking, but a way of keeping the door open, even when the other person has stepped away. Respecting their choice if they remain disengaged is about understanding that you can invite, you can create space, and you can offer calm presence, but you cannot and should not control another person's willingness to rejoin a conversation. When someone chooses to stay withdrawn, it's a sign that they either need more time, more emotional distance, or that their priorities in that moment simply lie elsewhere. Accepting that truth without resentment is a sign of emotional maturity and a recognition that connection is a two-way street. You can do your best to keep the door open, but it's up to them whether they walk through it. When you respect that choice, you're showing that you value their autonomy and that your relationship is built on mutual respect rather than on a need for compliance. That kind of respect has a lasting impact, even if it doesn't bring them back into the moment right away. Letting someone remain disengaged without taking it personally also protects your own emotional balance. It's easy to spiral into frustration or self-doubt when another person doesn't respond the way you want them to, but choosing to respect their disengagement keeps you from escalating tension unnecessarily. Instead of trying to force a resolution, you acknowledge that this is where they are right now and that pushing will likely widen the gap. By stepping back, you give them the space they might not even know they need, and you give yourself the freedom to move forward without resentment. This ability to release control over their immediate engagement is not about indifference. It's about holding the relationship above the need for instant results. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do in these situations is to carry on with your own presence and energy without making them feel like their disengagement is a problem that needs to be fixed right this second. That doesn't mean ignoring them. It means showing that you are still steady, still available, but not dependent on their response for your own composure. People often notice when you handle their distance without guilt tripping, and that awareness can plant seeds for reconnection later on. By not overreacting, you make it easier for them to return on their own terms because they know you won't use their absence against them. Respecting their choice also means recognizing that disengagement can sometimes be an act of self-protection. They might be avoiding a conflict, shielding themselves from stress, or simply conserving energy in a moment when they feel drained. When you understand that their withdrawal might be about their own emotional well-being rather than a personal slight against you, it becomes easier to let them have that space without letting ego take over. This perspective not only helps you respond more compassionately, it also reduces the risk of misreading the situation and reacting in ways that cause unnecessary strain. There will be moments where the silence feels heavy, and your instinct will be to fill it or break it, but respecting their choice means trusting that the relationship can withstand temporary disengagement without falling apart. It's about playing the long game, where you prioritize maintaining trust over winning the moment. In many cases, people return faster when they feel they're free to stay away as long as they need, because that freedom removes the pressure that often keeps them distant. This requires patience, and patience often feels uncomfortable, but it's a discomfort worth tolerating if it means keeping the relationship healthy. It's also worth remembering that respecting disengagement doesn't mean you're approving of it or that you'll never revisit the topic. It simply means you're choosing the right time and setting for that conversation instead of